Yep, good to go.
Dan's rolling.
You're all good to go?
Yeah.
Okay, look, thank you very much all for coming down here. Obviously, this has been a very tragic start to the new year here down on the Gold Coast. Yesterday at around 2 o'clock local time, we've had 2 helicopters that have been operating out of SeaWorld, both undertaking a tourist joy fly experience, have collided mid-air. Now that's a couple of 100 metres from the landing pad at SeaWorld and probably at 200 or 300 metres in the air. What we do know at this very early stage of the investigation is that one helicopter was taking off. That's had 7 people on board. Another one coming into land with 6 people on board. Now they've collided. The one helicopter that was taking off appears its main rotors have collided with the landing helicopter, caused considerable damage to the front section of that helicopter. In the process of that collision, the main rotor blades and gearbox of the helicopter taking off have separated from the aircraft, causing it to tragically crash down onto a sandbar. At this stage, we've got 4 people who have tragically lost their lives. Another 3 are in a very serious condition in hospital. The second helicopter coming into land, now that has remarkably managed to land upright, and considering the damage that was done to the front left-hand section of that helicopter where the pilot was sitting, that's been a remarkable achievement. So whilst it has been very tragic that 4 people have lost their lives and many families are mourning this morning, we could have had a far worse situation here, and the fact that that one helicopter has managed to land has been quite remarkable. The process now for the ATSB is to gather all the intelligence and all the evidence we can. We certainly would like to thank those of the community that were witnesses to the event who have come forward, those that have camera footage, CCT off buildings. That will be very important for us to try and put together what has occurred here, and particularly those final phases of flight. We know the takeoff and the landing phases of any aircraft operations are critical phases of flight where the cognitive workload of pilots are at their greatest. What we do need to know now is what was occurring inside those 2 cockpits at the time. We do have multiple accounts from witnesses and, as I said, a video, but equally we'll get what we can from those 2 helicopters to try and get a better picture of what was occurring, but equally what were the processes in place that are designed to actually protect helicopters in this situation. We know that it's a busy time of the year. We know helicopters are in and out of that SeaWorld helipad constantly throughout the day, so we'll certainly be looking at multiple lines of inquiry here around the procedures that were in place and potentially what has helped contribute to such a tragic outcome that we're standing here today. At this stage, the helicopters are both being removed off the sandbar. They'll be taken ashore where my investigators will get a better appreciation of exactly potentially what's occurred and the forces that were in play. But what I would like to say is that our thoughts do go out to all those that have been affected here, not only those on the helicopter and their extended families, but equally to all of those people who were on the boardwater yesterday that have witnessed what is very confronting scenes of those helicopters coming down, and particularly to those members of the public that were the first responders that were on scene, and then obviously to the police and emergency services and ambulance who had to deal with that site and do their best in very trying circumstances. As I said, they've both been on a sandbar. The tide has come up overnight. Whilst we did get a lot of that perishable evidence off the site last night, and the stuff that we really do rely on, a lot of that electronic, I guess, recording equipment, we now have a painstaking job of trying to recreate exactly what's occurred in the lead up to this tragic start to the new year. Happy to take any questions before handing over to the police.
Have you spoken to the surviving?
So we don't at this stage. As I said, we do have multiple accounts from witnesses and from cameras on buildings. What we'll need now is to try and piece together any recording devices, and that can be those that were fixed on the aircraft, and we know there was a number of them there. It's a tourist flight that does offer a tourist experience, so we will get what we can from the crash site, but equally if there's anything that happened to be on any of the passengers on board, and that's sometimes where we get some of our best information as well. So nothing at this stage, keeping in mind we're less than a day into this at this stage.
Have you spoken to the surviving pilot?
Look, so over the next few days we will be interviewing as many people as we need to around here, from witnesses to those on the helicopter, particularly onto the helicopter that survived. But we are also very mindful that today is obviously an extremely difficult day for a lot of people, particularly those that were involved in it. So my investigators will tread through that very sensitively. But as I said, that there's a lot of work for us to do now into trying to get a better picture of exactly what occurred at 2 o'clock yesterday.
What would you say about the skill and the presence of mind of the surviving pilot, given the circumstances and your experience in crash investigations, and how challenging those circumstances were for him?
Yeah, look, when any aircraft accident, there are enormous forces at play, and particularly helicopter collisions. So the presence of mind to be able to land that helicopter, particularly considering the damage that we know has occurred on that front left-hand seat of the helicopter, it does appear to be a remarkable job to have got it down. We'll have a better idea of exactly what was disrupted in that helicopter, what parts of the flight mechanisms were disrupted. But I would say at this stage that we are very fortunate that we're not standing here with far more deaths, notwithstanding the fact that there's 4 fatalities is a very tragic outcome.
How long will be the conditions?
Look, I guess that's part of piecing together all of the footage that we have. We know it was a couple of 100 metres in the air. The exact altitude and the forces involved is something that we'll piece together over the next few days.
What about the conditions yesterday? We heard it was quite windy. Is that something that would be critical in the investigation?
Look, we gather as much evidence as we can, and that'll be from the weather at the time, from the tasking, to how long those helicopters had been operating that day, to how long the pilots had been flying. There's a lot that go into it, the loading, the fuel, so they're the sorts of things that do take my investigators quite some time to piece together. And then we go through that painstaking process of determining what potentially had a contributing factor and what potentially didn't. So that's something that we won't know for quite some time yet.
What's happening at the moment? How many investigators are involved?
So at the moment, both the helicopters are being salvaged off that sandbank, and that's underway at the moment. That has been challenging, only one because it's a sandbank, to get out the heavy machinery required, but also because of the tides. Once we get them ashore and we start to go through the actual wreckage, we'll get a better appreciation. But that can be, as I just mentioned, the forces involved in a crash like this are considerable. There's considerable disruption to both airframes, and that will take us some time to get a better appreciation. No, we don't at this stage. So at this stage we know obviously that the collision, we have a reasonable understanding of what the 2 helicopters were doing, as I said, in those critical phases of flight. But exactly why this occurred, what was the range of visibility from both the pilots, what was happening inside the cabins at the time, they're the things that will help us piece together potentially what may have been a contributing factor here. But it's still very early stage in the investigation to start speculating.
What's Village Roadshow been able to tell you?
How many other flights they've done to that day?
No, look, one of the things we will piece together is all the flights that were conducted on the day. We do call out for witnesses who have taken flights on those helicopters in the day or the days preceding as well. It gets us a much better picture, an overall picture, but as I said before, the process now is gathering as much intelligence, as much evidence as we can, and then when the totality of that evidence is before us, then we can start looking at what does it mean.
Are there protocols for aircraft coming and going from that helipad, like in directions, or is it sort of like a free-for-all?
Look, there certainly is, and in any helicopter operations, what we'll have a look at now is what were the processes and the procedures in place operating out of SeaWorld. Were they all followed? Were they sufficient? And again, very early days, but what we're keen to know is what those 2 helicopters were doing at the time. What were the processes that were there in place to protect helicopters, particularly in those phases of flight? Once we've got all that, then we'll have a better idea as to what does it mean.
So to help answer those questions, to what extent are you relying on the cooperation of Village Roadshow?
Look, we'll rely on cooperation from multiple sources here, from pilots, from the regulator, from the operator there at the time, from obviously the surviving pilot, plus eyewitnesses. There's a multitude of different sources that we get all of our information from, and that's a process over the next couple of days that we'll start to gather all of that.
Are flights in this area now?
To the layperson who might not understand the road rules of travel, is there, when you talk about processes, are there right of ways, are there explosion zones and things? You're talking about what the standard process
different airspaces do have different procedures in place, and particularly one which is essentially, you know, an airport as such, being a commercial operation running out of there. What we yet to determine exactly what was in procedure at the time, what were the weather conditions at the time. So we certainly won't be speculating as to that at this point in time, but that's certainly part of the investigation going forward.
What's the current status of the flights?
Look, that's probably a matter for the operator and for the regulator at this stage. Our focus is very much on what occurred yesterday and what were the reasons behind it.
Just to put the impact very dangerous chocolate in perspective, what altitude are we talking about? This is falling around without any power. Just how much of that was the survival of people on board?
So the exact altitude is something we're yet to determine. We do know that the helicopter taking off had been airborne for less than 20 seconds on its ascent. Now, the forces involved in coming down, not only in the actual collision, are substantial, but then obviously in the uncontrolled fall, which essentially is what it was once it's lost its main rotor, are considerable. So again, until we really understand what was on board, what recording devices, we'll get a better appreciation of the forces involved.
Given the scale of this accident, where it is on the sandbank, all the factors, how difficult is it to gauge and how difficult this investigation is going to be to actually work out what's happening?
Look, all of our investigations are challenging. This is our third fatal aircraft accident in a week. We've had one in the Northern Territory where tragically 2 people lost their lives in very remote circumstances in very rugged bushland. So that is obviously a very challenging site for us to get to and to understand. We've had one just west of Sydney again that's been impacted by a fire post that. This one has been on a sandbank. All of them are challenging. I will say with this particular one, we do have a lot of eyewitnesses. We have a lot of footage, which will help us. But until we start to piece together that, we don't know what we don't know at this point in time. But all of ours are challenging to one degree or another, particularly to try and understand what was occurring inside the aircraft at the time of the collision. And that's something that we'll certainly be focusing on in the coming days.
Is it your understanding the main rotor collided with the other aircraft, and did the helicopter crash on the sand or in the water or on the air?
So we're still determining the exact sequence of events, but from the footage that we've seen and from the damage that we can witness on there, it does appear that the main rotor blade of the helicopter taking off has collided with the front cockpit of the descending helicopter on the left-hand side. Now, exactly whether that was the very first point of impact, we're yet to determine, but that in itself has led to the main rotor and the gearbox separating from that helicopter, which has meant that tragically it has then had no lift and has fallen heavily to the ground. It has been on a sandbar. Exactly whether it's hit the water and at what depth it was, I guess is what we'll determine based on the time of day that it occurred and exactly where on the sandbar. But we do know that the second helicopter has landed on the sandbar, and that has obviously led to the stage where we aren't seeing more fatalities here than what we could have.
Was there a mayday call, sorry, from either the chopper?
Look, at that stage we don't have all that information, and that's what we'll be gathering as much as we can at this stage.
The video footage was only about seconds after.
Yes, as I said, the helicopter taking off was in the air for less than 20 seconds, and after the collision it was a matter of seconds before it hit the ground. So it has unfolded very quickly.
We'll talk to...
Happy to hand over to the Queensland Police now.
Thank you very much. Look, I don't think I can add much more than what the ATSB has provided to you so far. We're obviously going to be working in conjunction with that agency. We're going to be preparing reports for the coroner, and we're going to be doing our investigations and getting our witness statements, and again getting all our information together to try and find out and piece together what's actually happened yesterday. Other than what my friend has indicated to you now, was there any other questions that you would like to know some answers to?
Can you tell us the ages?
The victims, we know that there are 4 deceased persons on the helicopter. One of the helicopters, so the 2 helicopters, one helicopter had a pilot and 5 passengers. That particular helicopter, all those persons survived the incident. The pilot and one of the passengers, they're still receiving some treatment at the hospital, but nothing threatening. For the helicopter the other helicopter, there were 7 persons on board, 6 passengers, 1 pilot. The pilot is deceased, and there are 3 other deceased persons. They're all adults. The 3 other critically injured, they're currently in hospital, still receiving some treatment. 2 juveniles and 1 adult. I believe that the mother and son, and also 1 other juvenile.
One was transported to Brisbane, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And how's that child coping?
Well, we still haven't had any confirmed reports, but critical, and we're just waiting an outcome.
What was the age of these people?
Of the people that are injured,
Yeah, and deceased as well.
deceased, anything range from 65 down to 37, and the critically injured, we've got a 10-year-old, 9-year-old, and a 33-year-old mother.
And the 2 deceased, 2 of them are British nationals, is that true?
That's what we understand, yes.
What about the third?
The third, New South Wales.
So, sorry, do you have the ages of all the deceased? Or just roughly their...
Just roughly, let me give that for you. So we've got deceased, we've got 36, 40, 57 and 65.
The 9-year-old boy was in Brisbane Hospital was there by himself last night. Is there any special measures being taken to support him given that he's
We have family support measures in place, and we would expect that there is support in that location. Yeah.
Yesterday we had one of your colleagues praising the efforts of those members of the public who rushed
Oh, absolutely.
to the scene. To what extent did they come play a role in
It was a very, very,
the chances of life?
obviously very, very confronting scene. Right at the very beginning, when the incident first occurred, we had private aircraft, so not aircraft, private vessels taking people across to the island to offer support to the victims. They did their very best with CPR until the emergency services got there. Unfortunately though, we did have those 4 that were deceased, but the 3 being worked on significantly at the scene until they got transported away to the ambulance.
Have you spoken to the surviving pilot? There are some witness accounts that he was trying to help people at the scene.
I'm not aware of that. I know that he's still undertaking some treatment in hospital, and we'll no doubt take up with him shortly.
The 2 British nationals and the person from New South Wales who all died, are they related in any way?
We believe that the 2 British nationals, we believe husband and wife, with a next of kin local, and the other person from New South Wales. There was other family members on board, as we understand it, but yeah.
Is everyone on that flight to each other, or are they part of the same?
The husband and wife, and obviously the mother and the son, and we believe that, hang on, I'll see if I can find that for you. And so one of the deceased was related to one of the survivors. The ones that are critically injured?
Yeah.
Okay. We have New South Wales and Victoria.
Any more questions for anyone? Thank you.
Thanks guys. Thank you very much.